probably the number one question I get all the time is, how in the world did you get to 90 plus stores, and how do you do it? And it's really a one word answer for us, which is people.
This is the Superhero Sidekick Coaching Podcast. I'm Joel Smith.
I'm Joe Baker. We're not here to be the superhero. We just want to be your sidekick and help you along in building your business. Let's help you grow it fast and really scale.
Be sure to check us out on Facebook and visit us at superherosidekick.com. Hey, Joe, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm excited for another podcast. It's been a little bit since our last one.
It has been a little bit. We took a little bit of break, but we were both busy. So what tell everybody what you've been doing the last few months.
It's been a lot of time helping my son become a great rock climber. And right now he is number one in our region of the country, which includes 5 states. That's a pretty unique title. I was never first at anything, but it turns out I'm a way better coach than an athlete.
Nice.
So.
Yeah. I've been following you on Facebook. It's pretty fascinating. And if anybody else wants to follow too and just kind of check out what Joe's talking about, go out to samadventure.com. He's got some great videos out there. It's worth it. It's Joe's got some pretty inspiring stories out there too, just about being a dad and a husband and just a family guy. So go check it out. It's really good. So, hey, Joe, today I've got a friend of mine on the show. His name is Jeremy Lovelace, and I've known him for maybe 8 or 10 years. Jeremy is, he's a franchisee of Papa Murphy's, just like myself, except he has about 10 times more stores than I do. So Jeremy has about 93 stores, and he's been doing this for quite a while. He and his father together started this many years ago. And so Jeremy, hey, I gotta hand it to you. You put together a lot of stores, and that's a big feat. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and it'll be fun to talk in this realm versus the normal Pop Murphy's realm that we talk in throughout the year.
Yeah. So Jeremy and I, we get to talk to each other at least 4 or 5 times a year, and we do a co-op meeting. So we're used to being on Zoom calls together, but we're always talking about boring stuff, like marketing calendars and all that stuff. So this will be a little bit more fun. So, hey, Jeremy, so tell us how you got into this. I know it started with your dad, but just give us an idea of how you got started and how this all kind of took place.
Yeah. Like you said, it did start with that. It's a family business. My dad had been managing a McDonald's for about 12 years. And his brother had been managing McDonald's as well for about 19 years. And every Saturday night, our families would get together and watch Cops and have tacos. That was the family tradition. And one of those nights, my dad and his brother, my uncle, were looking at the classifieds. So this goes back to when it started, which was 1990, when you still read newspapers. And in the classifieds, there was 2, back then they were called Papa Aldo's for sale. One was open and one was closed in our hometown here of Vancouver, Washington, which is ironically also the headquarters of Papa Murphy's is in Vancouver, Washington. Anyway, so they had been saving with all their McDonald's work. And I think we're kind of tired of reporting to the man and said, I think this is our ticket to do our own thing. And so, like I said, in November of 1990, they bought their first Papa Aldo's, which is now Papa Murphy's. Like I said, one open and one closed. The one that was closed because there's criminal activity going out the back, and the other one was still making pizzas. So they cleaned it up and got the second one open, and then kind of went on from there. So I was pretty young at that time. I was still about 7, 8 years old then. And so for me, obviously wasn't working full time or anything at that age. However, on weekends, I would be in there doing, the side item prep, or even on weekend nights, I would stand on a milk crate and wrap the pizzas. And so that's kind of where I got my first introduction to it. And obviously it was always a part of our world and our life. I feel like every time we'd go somewhere for dinner or go to church or go home from church, we'd always have to stop at a store to pick up a deposit or fix something or whatever it was. So definitely started at a young age for me. And my dad had a strategy of me kind of learning on someone else's dime versus his own. So kind of all through my high school years and whatnot, I didn't work in the stores. I worked in other hospitality outlets just because it is something that I was pretty passionate about doing at a young age. But between me not wanting to get burnt out on it and my dad wanting me to learn on someone else's dime, stayed in that space in the hospitality industry, but didn't really work in the stores until it was go time, which for me was right out of high school. So
Wow, nice. Yeah, so you really do have this in your blood, don't you?
yeah, exactly.
It's
Yep.
probably hard for you to remember a time when Papa Murphy's wasn't a part of your life.
Yeah, I mean it was McDonald's or Pop Murphy's. So and that was about it.
Yeah. So how did you know, or when maybe was the moment that you knew that, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to get into this. I want to be a leader and I want to run restaurants.
Yeah. I think there was always an entrepreneurial spirit in me. It was kind of wired in my DNA from mowing yards, the the classic selling of lemonade or selling golf balls on the golf course or those types of things. I think it was something I definitely had interest in. And then obviously, was blessed with the opportunity in a, front row seat in my family being, an entrepreneur. And so I think that only expanded it for me. So yeah, it's one of those things you just kind of, you have it or you don't. And I think others can develop it, but the ones that get it wired in them, what they choose to do with it is, what ultimately leads to one of the biggest successful entrepreneurs that I've spent time with in my life anyway. But so that's how it started for me.
Fair enough. What was some of the challenges of working in a family business? Because I know, you worked with your dad and then also your uncle, Jim, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I met Jim at someplace a few years
Yeah.
ago. Good guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Great guy. Yeah. I mean, first of all, the challenges still exist. Uh, they don't seem to ever go away, but I think you learn um, to do things in a better way that ultimately puts family first, which is, I think everyone likes to say, and we're no different, like to say, but, more challenging to do than say for sure. Getting in the weeds a little bit on it. I mean, we ultimately, so we still have stores in the Northwest with my uncle. But then my dad and I have stores, the majority of our stores outside of the Northwest, that are not with my uncle.
Mhm.
And I think, that stems from, some of the things you learn over the years to where, you ultimately want the same thing, but maybe you do things differently to get there. And when that's inside of a family dynamic, that can be a greater challenge than it is, those that are in business together that are not in a family. And so those are some decisions we made to ultimately, like I said, keep family first, right? Still be able to do Christmases together and birthday parties and all those things. Um, and, that included even separating offices. So here in Vancouver, where my uncle and his whole family still lives, we actually operate out of separate offices. Um, and, we kind of divide the stores up from a day-to-day standpoint. And, we set our goals and we set our guardrails in the lane in which we achieve those goals and try and meet frequently to, hold each other accountable. But that's what we found, that works for our dynamic. I'm sure there's, many different ways to do it, but that's kind of how we overcame the challenge of, a family business and the dynamic of, growing at the pace in which we grew as well.
Hmm. Fair enough. I know Joe and I have talked about branding quite a bit. And I know, Jeremy, you're pretty passionate about the brand. You've done this for a long time. It's dwelt in, it's built into your mind now. And just in our meetings, I can see that you're passionate about this and you take our brand seriously, protecting it and promoting it. And what's your thought on just the idea of restaurant branding? How important is that? Some restaurants really focus on that more than others, consistency, and some really are very loose on their branding and they just always changing and not really sticking with anything. But what's your thoughts on branding when it comes to restaurants?
Yeah, I think for me, the way I look at it, and the way that I try and build our team around it is, it's almost more about relationship building than it is about branding for us. The branding may be what can get him in the door, but it's the relationships that, keep him coming in that door for us. But that's a real challenge in a franchise. There's many positives and there's some challenges or cons to franchises. And one of the challenges in a franchise is the branding aspect, because we don't have much control as franchisees of that. I'm lucky enough that I'm able to serve on many different boards inside the brand that helps advise the brand on things like product, or on things like marketing. But ultimately it's their call, right? And then it's our job to execute. And so that can be a challenge. And so we put a heavy emphasis on branding, as you say, or for us, relationship building on inside the four walls of each of our restaurants, because that's
Because
ultimately what we have control over.
yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah, we are a little unique in
yeah,
that way. Yep.
yeah.
What drives people in the door these days? Like, what's the best way to market and to sell yourself?
Yeah, so this brand has gone through the phase that I think everyone's gone through in regards, from traditional marketing to obviously more digital marketing. And I would say we were probably later to the game than most. But we face a pretty unique challenge with this concept that, we don't really have anyone else to compare to. If you think about it, there's not another take and bake concept, out there, anything more than maybe a one or two operation somewhere, right? So in your other concepts, whether it's fast food burgers, or the Domino's and the Pizza Huts and those guys, they can look at the success or not the success of the others, and maybe make adjustments. We're a bit on an island there, and so for us, there's a lot of trial and error, which can be really, really expensive. Um, and the other side of that, Joe, is that we've spent quite a bit on research to try and understand, to your point, what drives them in, because we don't have the others to compare to, right? And so one of the, I would say, epiphanies or realizations that I think we've had as a brand over the last probably 6 months to a year is that I think we've naturally compared ourselves to the other pizza players. And I think what we found through our research is that a lot of consumers, or most consumers, are not necessarily deciding between your traditional pizza concept of, the big five out there, or Papa Murphy's. What we've learned is that they're more so deciding between whether they're going to cook at home tonight or grab a Papa Murphy's. And that's been a bit of a realization for the brand, I think. And then, so to your point, in terms of what's driving them in, that's what we've really seen a shift in the last 6 months. And I think Joel can probably speak to this, with his stores, we've seen some success in the altering of our marketing, where we're placing it, where we'd be placing it maybe against the person who's trying to decide between Pizza Hut and Pop Murphy's, and now we're placing it against the person who's deciding whether they're going to go to, the grocery store or Pop Murphy's, right? So that's been a real shift in the brand, I would say, over the last half year or so. And knock on wood, but so far seeing some positive impact from it.
And when you say like building community, what ways like can you really build that community? Like, what ways can you really build that as a pizza place?
The number one single largest driver for us is, again, back to that relationship inside the four walls, which is tough to build a relationship if you are going through managers left and right, or you're going through crew left and right, which is somewhat natural in the quick service industry. But we try and invest quite a bit into our people, like I know Joel does with his, so that we can have a better retention rate than the norm, so that those relationships can be built. And we've definitely been successful at that over the years. And I think probably the number one question I get all the time is, how in the world did you get to 90 plus stores, and how do you do it? And it's really a one word answer for us, which is people. I mean, we have managers that have been with us over 20 years. I mean, in a quick service restaurant, and it's like that's insane. That's unheard of. And so we watch people have kids and have their kids now go to college, or buy their second home, or those types. I mean, that's the legacy piece. But that's also the piece that's built the community for us, right? That's the piece that's built the relationships inside the stores that have been bleeded out into the community and been successful for us.
Yeah, it is true that TV and radio and print and digital, all of that, really all it does is it gets them in the door, and it's up to us to keep them through those relationships like you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
How many team members do you have at 93 stores?
A little over 1,500.
Wow.
that's a
So
lot.
is this at a million a month or a million a week? Like the revenue? That's gotta
In
be
terms of revenue,
Yeah.
yeah, we do close to 60 million
So
a
you
year.
passed a million a week. Wow, cool.
So
Yeah, that's a lot.
yeah,
That really
it's
shrinks.
a lot. It's a lot of
Makes
responsibility.
my number look real small, but
There's also a lot of expenses in that. So
Yeah, of course. And a lot of drama.
a lot of drama and a lot of babysitting, all the above.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations. It's pretty rad.
thank you.
Jeremy, what do you think was maybe more difficult than you imagined along the way? If you go back, when you were just starting out, and I'm sure something smacked you in the face that you didn't expect.
Yeah, so I'll give you a history or a past example, and I'll give you a more current example. So, history example is we were after the first franchisee or people, whatever, to open a store in Canada. And again, living out here in Washington State, we went into the British Columbia, kind of the northwest side, where we could drive back and forth as we built stores. Ended up building 18 stores in British Columbia and Alberta. And again, I mean, we're talking about literally driving, into another country just across the Washington border into Canada there. And I think I really had the assumption that it would be just like where I left my home that morning to drive up there to. And so we started opening stores and started using the same tactics that we had used to get us to the point we were at. And quickly realized, even though, it's a 15-minute drive across the border, it was extremely different. Number one, extreme food challenges. So again, going back to our concept, Joe, is we use 100% whole milk mozzarella for our cheese. And all the other guys use what's called a pizza cheese, and it's a processed cheese, so it's not necessarily a real cheese. Well, Canada has a dairy program, stabilization program, to where you don't really have any big conglomerates of dairy in Canada. Every farmer is allowed to produce only so much dairy, so every farmer has equal opportunity to make a living. And so there's not real competition up there. And so therefore the price of dairy in Canada is about 4 times higher than it is in the US.
Oh.
And you are also only allowed to bring across 10 pounds of dairy a day from the States into Canada. So we couldn't ship our 4 times less cheese into Canada.
Did you learn how to milk a cow?
Yeah, no.
He's not allowed.
Yeah, it wasn't allowed, right? But so then what happened is, I mean, we had to charge, a lot more, or either greatly alter, our product. And when you talk about quality versus quantity and what built the brand and all those things, it was a real challenge. What do? Do we alter the core of our product, and the cheese, and go to a processed cheese? And we didn't. Ultimately, we took away our largest size pizza. So in the States, there's a family size, like an extra large size. In Canada, that didn't exist because we would have had to charge like $30 for it because there's over a pound of cheese on it. So, we had to make some adjustments, some there. So that was not what I expected. And then on the people side, I'd opened these stores, and I'd been opening stores for a long time, on the state side. And I'd just be, for lack of a better term, cracking the whip on the employees, like, let's go, let's move, get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out. And, started seeing complaints come in about, man, there's some guy, and, seemed like he was in charge, but he's just rushing everyone, and they're sending in complaints. And quickly realized that the culture up there is, they weren't trying to get in and out. They have a much slower culture up there, to where, no, let's talk about how your day was. I don't care if my pizza takes 10 minutes, versus stateside, more generally, it's get me in, get me out, right? How fast can you get me that product? And so that was another thing where I realized this is not what I thought it was going to be. And so we had to, really run two different systems across our stores, kind of a stateside system and a Canadian system. And but yeah, had to make some mistakes there to ultimately learn and be better. But that was a challenge in the past. We no longer have those stores. We sold those stores to some Canadian operators, which was better for everyone, and then kind of expanded more in the U.S. So on the more current one, Joel, in terms of challenge or things that wasn't what I expected, I think. I think the biggest thing is what gets you maybe to one or two stores is very different than what gets you to 30, 40, 50, 70 plus. And so I think that was, and it continues to be, because ultimately we started with 1/2, and it's still what's ingrained in us. And so it's still a current challenge of remembering that, we can't do things like we did, when we only had a few stores. And that obviously gets into more of a scalability piece, but it's really hard, right? When you build something, I think it'd be a lot easier if we bought, 50 stores at once, and that's just the way it was. But when you start from one, it's a challenge. It's hard to, I'm not going to say you care less about people, but it's hard to have less relationships with, those employees that work for you. You have to, because there's not enough time in the day to have, the same relationships with 1,000+ employees as you did when you had 20. It's not feasible.
Yeah, that's right. That's definitely a challenge, and it's a bigger challenge for you on your level too. So when you get to that many stores, for sure. Jeremy, what advice would you give anybody that's interested in getting into the business of restaurant franchisee, being a franchisee of maybe multiple units? If somebody's interested in, buying 3 stores and starting out, what would you tell them?
First and foremost, I would figure out, how you get the opportunity to go work in whatever concept that is. Because what I can tell you is that whether you have one store, whether you have 10, 30, 40 plus, if you're not passionate about it, right, it's already hard. It's extremely hard. But if you don't love it, we've, out of the 90+ stores, we probably acquired 50 of those, right? And maybe built the other 40 from scratch. And the majority of those acquisitions are people who, got into it because they thought it would be fun, or they grew up on the product. And so, it's going to be great. We're going to have our own. And when that lease renewal comes up in 5 years, or many times they don't even make it to that point, right? Because they realize it's not what they thought it was. And then that's when the phone call happens. And, they're usually going to the largest operator or someone who's in their backyard, which we're in a lot of different places. And they're saying, help, get me out of this thing. Right. So, and some onus comes on the brand for that. I think, what a franchise or what a franchisor should do for you is that screening process. And they shouldn't let a guy who's, been doing pest control, own a Pop Murphy's or fill in the blank. I mean, it's not, just because maybe they have the capital to do so.
It happens.
The reality is that it happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that guys like you and I, Joel, when that store opens up in our city, right, that they sold it to the pest control guy or whatever, and it fit, the customer doesn't know the difference.
The veterinarian, we had one. We had a veterinarian open one up in the heart of Des Moines, and he was the first guy that came along that didn't come and talk to me ahead of time, because Papa Murphy's, I think, told him not to talk to me. So anyway,
So
he went out of business so quickly. Sure. All right.
So my advice would be to spend some time. And I think one of the greatest QSR models out there is Chick-fil-A, in terms of franchisor to franchisee type thing. And what they require to be a franchisee is, that thing is the gold standard. I mean, you gotta, you have to manage a store for 18+ months before you can even be, considered, so to speak, right? But I'm sure that process, they don't end up with the veterinarian to your point, or the pest control guy, opening a store. So there's a lot to be said about that.
Sounds good. Well, hey, Jeremy, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show. And for all of you out there, make sure you leave a comment, and we'll talk to you next time.
You bet. Thanks for having me.